like it at your house, but you haven't been to this class before. Well, welcome. I'm excited.
She's Kiana's sister.
I'm glad
Kiana's sister.
Know that I'm a new fan. Hey, Hunter. Hi. Air high five, bro. All right, let's get this party started. The lot fell to me, so I'll say the opening prayer, which I'm really sorry, which means you're going to have a lot of me today. Okay, we'll start with a. Should we start with a song? We should start with a song. You're passing out the scriptures. Let's do a song. We're going to do. Anybody got a hymn they want to start out with? Right, I like it. What hymn?
Can you guys hear him and see him okay if I sit over here?
It's a little fuzzy. Or it's a little blurred as far as the sound goes.
Can't zoom in any.
It's on page 239.
239. So page 239. Okay. And how many verses are there? 3?
And then
I'm going to find out. Let's just start singing it. All right. Choose the right when a choice. It's not going to be a solo. Well, okay. 1, 2, 3. Choose the right when a choice is placed before you. In the light, the Holy Spirit guides, and its light is forever shining on you. And in the light, your heart confides. Choose the right. Let wisdom mark the way. In His light, choose the right, and God will bless you evermore. All right. And then I'll say the opening prayer since the lot fell to me. All right. Our Father in heaven, we are so grateful to be met this morning as a Sunday school, and we're thankful to share this time in the scriptures. We're grateful for those scriptures and those prophets who recorded their experiences with thee and left them for us to learn and profit by. And Father in heaven, we are relying on your promises. That promise that says that where 2 or more are gathered in thy name, that thy Spirit will be there also. And we trust and pray that the Holy Ghost will help those who teach and those who receive, that we can both learn together. And to please empty our hearts of any desires that are tied to this world, and that instead we will learn to desire thee above all things. We pray and ask for these things this morning in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. All right. We're going to start out by asking if any of you have a gospel question. Burning gospel question. Others? Gospel question? You're good, Tesla? Good. Okay, good. Okay. Now, you guys can come with questions. In fact, Laylee, she sponsored a brilliant Sunday school lesson like a week ago, 2 weeks ago. You have a question? What's your question, dear?
I don't know.
You don't know? That's a good question. That's the place to start. When you don't know, that gives you an open mind to learn everything. So,
Hey Zoe, if any of you guys want to say something, just raise your hand and I'll stop Nathan and then let you guys talk to him, okay?
All right.
So today we're going to talk about desire. Okay, there's a very famous book called Faust. And Faust is about this physician and lawyer because back then guys couldn't just be or do one thing. They had to be like, do 2 or 3 things, right? He lived in Denmark. And this is not a true story. This is a fictional story. But Faust, talk louder, Faust, he wrote this story, and in it, he says in the very beginning, 2 hearts beat within my chest. One yearns for those things of the world about me, my comforts and my carnal desires, and the other yearns for that divine that I search for longingly and dearly. And so Faust talks about there's these 2 hearts that beat within us. And I think that's really beautiful just because of the imagery, and it's good literature too. One of these days, all of you guys will be compelled to actually read Faust as part of your school and academic work. And anyway, he spends his life trying to sort out what he really wants and what he really desires. And first he tries wealth. He goes after wealth. Then he goes after companionship, like friendship and love and lust and all those things. And then finally, wow, I've got a new 4-legged class member. This is awesome. Okay, I can roll with it. Hi there.
Little class distraction.
So how cute is that? So, he tries to figure out life, and he ends up making a deal with the devil. If you want to know where the original deal with the devil plot came from, it came from Faust. And at the end, he realizes that there's nothing in this world that can ultimately satisfy his desires. He realizes that there's only something outside of himself, and he finds out through the grace of Jesus Christ that that's where he can find fulfillment of his desires. And so that was Faust's take on it. And in fact, for a couple of centuries, every shelf in Germany had 2 books on it. It had the Bible, and it had Faust on it. And anyway, he addresses this most basic of all human things, desire. And desire fuels pretty much all of our action. And desire is just one layer below faith. So faith drives all action, but desire lies below faith. So to help you guys understand your own behaviors and the things that you guys deal with in the world, you need to understand that you have within you, in your heart, desires. Now, if you were to talk to a Orthodox rabbi, he would tell you that you have 613 desires, and that God gave us 613 mitzvah, or commandments, to teach us to shape and train those desires to reorient from ourselves and the things around us, to reorient us back to desiring God above all things. Okay, that's what a rabbi would teach you. And I think there's some merit. I think there's some value in that teaching. The fact is that we have all these desires. We have this jumble and this mess of desires. And a big challenge, or a big part of our life, is to train up and to sort through and to reorient those desires to focus on Christ. Okay? And we should desire Christ first and above all things. Okay? And if we do, okay, we'll have, there's some significant benefits to it. Now, just above desire is faith. So you wake up in the morning and little Enoch. Are you still little Enoch, or have you managed to become big Enoch yet? I don't know. We'll measure you guys up in a little bit. So little Enoch, when you wake up this morning, what was your first desire? What did you say?
More sleep.
More sleep, yep. How many people woke up this morning and you desired more sleep? Yay, that's pretty normal. I understand that desire. Could you grab that door for him, please? Okay. That's a very normal desire. So you desired more sleep. Okay. Now, if you had, so there's desire and then there's faith. Faith is what moves you guys to action. So you have these desires that give your action direction, but faith is what actually gives you power to go in any direction. The reason why I get up at 5:30 in the morning every morning and I drive 400 miles a day is because I have faith at the end of 4 weeks I'm going to get a paycheck. How long do you think I would get up at 5:30 in the morning and drive 400 miles a day if at the end of the month no paycheck came?
Very long.
What?
Not very long.
Not very long. That is the correct answer. I would be like, no, this program. So I have faith in my employer that if I get up at 5:30 every morning and drive my 400 miles and do everything I'm supposed to, that at the end of that, I get a paycheck. If that didn't happen and I lost my faith in that, I would succumb to my next greatest desire, which is for more sleep, right? So this morning he woke up and he desired more sleep. And then he sat there and he said, well, he had faith that his parents would urge him out of bed and to come to Brother Dilts' Sunday school. So he put off that desire and he put on the desire of, I want to, not come under the wrath and ire of my parents. Or he might even have evolved to the point where he wants to please his parents, right? Or maybe he's evolved beyond that and he says, it's my duty to go to Sunday school. Or maybe he evolved beyond that and he said, well, I want to go to Sunday school because I love Christ and I want to learn more about him. Now, you don't have to answer the question and tell me which one of those desires or which one of those levels of faith you acted upon this morning, but I want you to realize that there's a ladder of motivation when it comes to your desires and to your faith. And the lowest rung is fear. So if I were in your notebooks, I would be writing a ladder and I would put the very bottom rung as fear. The next rung up on the ladder is duty. Okay? Some people, they in their ladder of motivation, they have a sense of duty that they, or you know what? Excuse me. Sorry, duty's a little. I skipped a rung. The next rung on the ladder is social. Okay. Now, it may have been that this morning when you woke up and you're like, well, my parents aren't going to let me fulfill my first desire, which is to sleep in. So they're going to make me go to Sunday school. You might have done it out of fear, which I don't think you would have. But you could have done it out of social. You could be like, there's going to be a lot of cute girls at Sunday school. And if I show up, I will look spiritual.
Well, your sisters and cousins, but
Yeah, it could be it. Or you might have friends who will be like, dude, we all showed up to Sunday school. We sacrificed our desire to sleep in. Why weren't you there? So there could be like positive social pressure, like pretty people. And there could be negative social pressure, like, where were you, man? Right? So, but social is one of the things on our ladder of motivation of why we do things. Now, the next one is duty. Sometimes, and some people are deeply, it's kind of sometimes it's a personality thing, but sometimes they have a deep sense of duty. And so they're going to do it because, dadgummit, that's what you're supposed to do, right? Some people are strongly motivated by duty. Some people are lightly motivated by duty. You know, I know that there are some Sundays where me and my wife talk, well, it's never actually my wife, it's me. It's all me. And I'm sitting there like, should we do church or not? Well, I have a family. I'm supposed to be a good example, and I need my children to like have Jesus, so I guess and I'm doing it out of duty. okay? So duty can sometimes be, it's sometimes the reason why we do a thing. The next reason on our ladder of motivation that we do things is out of obedience. Now, this bears a discussion because a lot of the people think that obedience is somebody says and you do, okay? Like you think of like obeying an order in the army or in the military. Your commander said, charge that machine gun nest, and you're like, sir, yes, sir, and you like, and you charge the machine gun nest, and really hope that it works out for you, right? Okay, that is not obedience, okay? The word obedience comes from the word obeisance, okay? Like when you give obeisance to something or someone, okay, that means that you give loyalty to something that is more powerful than you. Traditionally, this word is used with monarchs and kings and queens, like when, or if you guys remember the Old Testament story, the story of Joseph, when he had his dream and there were 7 sheaves of grain, or excuse me, there were 12 sheaves of grain, and there was his in the middle, right? What did the other sheaves of grain do?
All over that.
They bowed. In fact, that's what the word obeisance means. It means to bow or to yield, okay? And remember those sheaves of grain bowed or yielded, and then he said, I had a dream that there was 12 stars, and mine was the brightest. And then there was the sun and the moon. And what did the sun and the moon and the other 11 stars do? They bowed. They gave obeisance. In fact, if you look in your King James Bible, that's the word that it actually uses. They gave obeisance to his star. Okay? So obedience is not blind following of directions or orders. Okay? That would be closer to actually duty. Okay? That's like thoughtless, compliance with the direction. Obedience means that you acknowledge that somebody is higher, greater, brighter, and you are giving your loyalty to them. You're bowing, conceding, or yielding to them. Now, this is an important thing to understand because in the gospel ladder of motivation here, when it deals with desires of faith, I want you guys to get this very important thing, because when it talks about wives needing to obey their husbands, this is not mindless compliance. This is not, my husband says, therefore I do. Okay? That's called compulsion. Okay? Obeisance is where this goes, this is really where it is D&C 121. So husbands, future husbands out there, you guys need to be worthy of your wife's loyalty and of her choice to yield to you. You get what I'm saying? And wives, you need to, if your husband chooses Christ first, if he gives his obedience, if he gives his obeisance to Christ first, okay, you need to be willing to yield to him. Does that make sense? And it's all in the context of D&C 121. And this, I couldn't be more imperative on it. In certain fundamentalist circles, in fact, there was a huge division in some of the larger groups over the question of agency versus obedience, which was the first law of the gospel, agency or obedience. And in the groups that chose obedience, they weren't talking about real obedience, because there is no obedience without agency. You need to understand that. And this, I could not stress how important this is to understanding the gospel. Is God all powerful? Okay.
Yes.
Is he all knowing?
Yes.
Could he make us do what he says?
Probably.
Yeah. But what is that worth to him? If you have to make somebody love you or follow you, do you really have them?
No.
It's a lie. Okay, that's why the adversary's plan is a non-starter. It wouldn't work. You can't make everybody come back home. And even if you did, so what? It's like trying to make a puppy love you. This is a bad program. This is why cats are so horrible, right? You can't make them love you, right? Now, some of them are affectionate, and I just injured all the cat-loving people around here. Okay. Cats that choose to love you are vastly superior to the ones who think they're superior to you and deign to bless you with their presence, right? In so humble opinion. So, cat lovers of the world, fear not. I should make the point that Joseph Smith was convinced that his dog Sergeant would go with him into the resurrection. There's nothing in the scriptures or that Joseph Smith said that said the cats get to go to heaven. Just throwing that one out there. But anyway, and I want to point out what are the familiars to witches. But anyway, putting all those details aside, yes, dogs go to heaven. No, don't believe. Oh, whoops. I'm just kidding. All cats and dogs go to heaven. I'm sure. So, but obedience does not work outside of agency. That's what I want you to understand. There's no obedience if there's no agency. Unless you can choose to be loyal and yield yourself to somebody, you cannot be obedient to them. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. The next rung on the ladder of motivation is consecration. Okay? And these last two rungs, I've gone back and forth in making them one and the same or different. And I'll talk to you, I'll give you the last two rungs. The last rung, or the ultimate rung, is charity. Now, if you really understand consecration, there's no distinction between charity and consecration, okay? How many of you, what is the scriptural definition of charity?
Pure love of Christ.
You said it, and you said it. It's the pure love of Christ. Very good. It's the pure love of Christ. That is correct. It's the pure love of Christ. For who or for what?
You could have charity for anything.
Again?
You could have charity for anything, right?
You can.
Any person.
You can have charity for anything, but Christ, when he had the pure love of Christ, when he had charity, who did he have charity for? Did he? This is a very, I'm gonna challenge you, and I don't want you just to accept it because I'm so devilishly handsome and good looking, and I'm the one standing here, and I'm wearing really cool cowboy boots. I want you to accept what I'm saying for all those plethora of reasons. I want you to think about what I'm about to tell you and challenge me in the scriptures. But when Jesus Christ was in the Garden of Eden, okay, when he was in the Garden of Eden, and he was suffering to the point where he was ready to give up, okay, who was the person that he's like, I'm going to go ahead and go through this for you? God. Was it all of us? It was God. He said, nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. Charity for Christ was a pure love for his Father. Now, you need to understand that because he loves the Father, and we are all of his children, who does he then love? All of us. Does that make sense? And by the way, this is going to feed back into desire here in just a second. But when we have charity, we need to have the pure love of Christ for who?
Each other.
Could be each other. So in First Nephi, when he said, First Nephi chapter 30 and 31, when he talked about getting baptized, he says that when you're baptized, you're not baptized to wash away your sins because Christ was sinless and yet he was baptized. Why did Christ get baptized? Say it louder.
Out of obedience to God.
out of obedience to God. And why was he obedient to God? Because he loved him, right? So Christ got baptized out of obedience. He was giving his loyalty, yielding himself to the Father out of love, right? And then Nephi says, that's the same reason you should be baptized. You should be baptized, yielding your loyalty, your love to Christ. You guys catch that? So Christ in the Garden of Eden, he said, not my will, but thine be done. In this life, we say not our will or my will, but Christ be done, right? And when we have charity, the pure love of Christ, we're Christ. Now, whose children are we all now? When Christ was in the Garden of Eden, we were all the children of the Father. But the Father then, after he worked through his resurrection and became perfected, the Father gave all of his children to who? Christ. And so, whose children are we all? Christ. So, when we have the pure love for Christ, then we love all of the things that he loved. I'll be honest with, I've been hanging around this community for about 8 years now. How old were you 8 years ago?
5.
You were 5, okay? Did you know I loved you back then? Why did I love you back then, 8 years ago, when you were 5 years old? Yes, because I loved your mom and dad. That's exactly right. In fact, you have little tiny brothers and sisters that I barely know, right? Faith, how old were you 8 years ago? 6, right? You guys remember me 7 or 8 years ago? And did I talk to you, hang out with you a ton? No. No, not really. You were like little knee-high rugrats running around making mud pies and doing all your things, right? You know, I'd say hi and I'd be nice, but I loved you guys. I loved you guys because of your parents, right? Does that make sense? Because of how much I loved your parents, by extension, I loved you guys. If I saw a Mayflower moving truck heading towards you, I would have run and scooped you up and got you out of the way, right? I wouldn't have been like, hey, not my kid, not my problem. That program wouldn't have worked, right? I'd go out on a limb for you guys because I love your parents. Now, you two have grown up in 8 years, and you showed up at a few of my seminary classes and Sunday school, and I've come to know you guys individually. And now I have reason to love you for you. Like, you guys are kind of interesting now, and you have a personality, and so there's lots of fun things about you, right? So now I love you for your parents, but I also have started to come to love you guys for you. Does that make sense? Okay, so charity, the pure love of Christ, that pure love we have for all men comes through Christ, right? And this is where we get back to desires, where you should desire Christ above all things. We are heirs and joint heirs with Christ in all things. That's in Romans 8. I think chapter 8, verse 14, okay? We are heirs and joint heirs with Christ in all things, okay? But we have all things through our desire for Christ, and we should desire Christ above all things. I love my wife, Rebecca. But if I love Rebecca and desire her first, and there's a lot of good reasons why I would, if I did, I would be committing idolatry. Okay? I know my wife is a goddess, but if I put worship of her above worship of Christ, I'm an idol worshiper. Right? But if I love Christ, if I desire Christ first, and I realize he is mine because of the atonement of Jesus Christ, okay, then my desires are properly aligned, and I can truly love her through Christ, and I can have her through Christ. Does that make sense? You guys tracking with me? Let's go to Exodus chapter 21. So here we are. We're at the foot of Mount Sinai, and in chapter 20, the big booming God of the fiery pillar on top of the mountain who speaks so loud that it makes your bones rattle. Like he was the first one that discovered bass and tweeters that were enough to cause your heart to skip out of rhythm, okay? So he speaks loud enough that your bones rattle. And I was told you're speaking about cats. You know that, right? Yeah. Will you forgive your father? Alice disregards the feline species. Okay, good deal. My daughter is an ardent and determined cat lover, and I've yet to figure out because she wants to spurn me or if it's out of the desire for the animal. But anyway, it's all right, Exodus 21, booming top mountain, okay, and he shouts down the 10 sayings. Those are what we call the 10 commandments. And then the children of Israel are like, whoa, 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 turn the speakers off. We're scared to death. Moses, you go up there and you get all of God's law and then you bring it back down to us. And then whatever you say God says, we'll agree to do, right? That's what happened, okay? Well, in Exodus 21, okay, the very first of the written commandments that he brings down is about how to have slaves. Now, I want you to think about that for a second, how ironic that is. That he just freed them from 400 years of slavery, right? They were all slaves in Egypt. And then the first thing he does is give them laws on, okay, here's how you guys properly do slavery with each other. How many of you think that's kind of weird? A few of you. You're like, well, let's look at this, okay? Because there's something I want you to understand about this chapter. And the first thing I want you to get is that this isn't talking about the kind of chattel slavery that we saw in Egypt or in the South in U.S. history, okay? This would actually be closer to an apprenticeship that you saw during the colonial period in the United States, okay? So it wasn't slavery in the sense of you buy and trade people as property for their whole lives, okay? It was sort of an indentured servitude, okay? That's the first thing I want you to get. Second thing I want you to get is that you guys need to understand that you actually are all slaves, okay? And instead of seeing this as scriptures on how to do slavery, which it talks about, but I want you to notice how it teaches you how you walk out of slavery. Does that make sense? And let's look at the verses together. So go to Exodus 21, and who's going to be my booming voice of the prophet Moses? The volunteer? I've got Exodus 21. All right, you're my booming voice of prophet Moses. Read it good and loud, Adar, starting in verse 1.
Now these are the judgments which thou shalt set before them.
Okay, so he's like, Moses, here's these laws, these judgments that you're going to set before the children of Israel. Keep going.
If thou buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing.
Okay, so first rule on running slaves, Jehovah style, is that you buy them for how long?
6 years.
6 years, and then in the 7th year, you do what? Yep. By the way, you know how long indentured servitude periods during the U.S. Colonial period were? 6 years. And then in the 7th year, by the way, that was the way it was during medieval Europe. Most of the time, if your boy was 12 or 13 years old, and let's say that I am a shoemaker, and there's only room for one shoemaker in the village, right? And I'm it. I could train him to be a shoemaker, but then he'd have to go find another village to be a shoemaker, right? And here's the other thing. I'm not a very good shoemaker, so my family's seriously impoverished. And so his prospects for rising above his condition are very small, right? And so I sit there and I look at the blacksmith and I'm like, well, that guy seems to be doing very well, and he seems to have more work than he can handle. And what's more is his work has a lot more value to the community and society and he's a lot more prosperous than I am. If I could teach my son to be a blacksmith instead of a shoemaker, he'd do a lot better. But can I teach him how to be a blacksmith? No. So what I do is I come over and I say to my 12-year-old son, you're getting to this lovely stage where you are eating me out of house and home, and I'm a poor shoemaker. What time is it?
It's 11:06.
It's 11:06. Oh, okay, I'm good. I'm a poor shoemaker, and I can't afford to feed you, much less I couldn't train you how to do this better and more prosperous thing. So I go to the blacksmith and I say, I got this 12-year-old strapping lad who eats like a horse, but if you would like, I will apprentice him to you. And if you'll feed him, and if you'll clothe him, and if you'll put a roof over his head, he'll do whatever it is you ask of him. But by the end of those 6 years, he needs to know how to be at least a journeyman blacksmith, right? And so he's like, well, I could use the help around. So he signed you up. Now at 12, do you start hammering out swords? No. You know what you do? You carry a lot of things for him. You gather the wood. You build the fires in the morning. You wake up before he does, and you build the fires in the smelter, right? You're the guy that sweeps up the blacksmith shop, puts away the tools, piles the junk metal,
makes him breakfast.
Make him breakfast. Yeah, you're doing all that. But then in a year or two, he begins to start to teach you how to heat metal. So you don't even get to touch the hammer or the anvil, right? He starts with, here, take this over, put it in, and run the billows, and get this red rock this long. So you start doing that, and then time goes on. But by the end of 6 years, you get to go out free. But what do you know how to do? You know how to be a blacksmith. Does that make sense? So we're talking about indentured servitude, and we're talking about how it's for a 6-year period. It's free. All right, Adar, keep reading.
And if he came in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he were married, then his wife shall go with him.
So at 12, if you come in, are you married? No, not yet. Not by a long shot. Okay? Now, let's say that you are, let's say that you're older. Let's say that you're 20. You do have a wife, and you're like, well, I tried being a shoemaker like my dad, and this isn't working out, so I'd rather be a blacksmith. So you came in with a wife. When your 6 years are over, you get to leave with your wife, right? But if you were, well, let's see what happens. Read the next word.
If this master have given him a wife, and she born him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out by himself.
Okay, so if at age 16, you're a pretty village girl, and you're like, I want to marry her, and the blacksmith is like, well, all right, you're going to marry her now. Realize that you're going to, she's going to be coming under my roof, and I'm going to have to be feeding her and any kids to come along with it. And when you leave without her and the kids. Okay? I love that look. That is the look of like, ooh, I don't know if I think this deal with God is a bad deal, right? How many of you are starting to be like, I'm not sure what Heavenly Father is doing here. This is pretty messed up. All right, let's keep reading.
And if the servant shall plainly say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free. Then his master shall bring him unto the judges, and he shall also bring him to the door or unto the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with and all, and he shall serve him forever.
Okay. I want you to read those two verses again.
And if thy servant shall plainly say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free. Then his master shall bring him unto the judges, and he shall also bring him to the door or unto the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with all, and he shall serve him forever.
Here's the thing I want you guys to understand about these verses. He just brought, 5 billion, not 5 billion, 5 million slaves out of Egypt, the foot of Sinai. And the very first written commandments he gives them is about slavery. They were all slaves. And he gave them freedom. Okay? You guys are all born into a condition of slavery. Don't believe me? Go read the epistles of the Apostle Paul. We are all slaves to sin. You remember First Nephi, where he says the devil leadeth you slowly, that binds you with chains that are light, and slowly leadeth you down to hell until the chains get heavier and weigh you down. We are all slaves to sin. Okay? Now, who came to free you from those chains? Jesus Christ did, right? So he set you out so you can go free. But if you say,
I love my master, my wife, and my children.
okay, so if Christ frees you from the chains or the slavery of sin, and you turn to him and you say, I love my master, and I love my wife and my children, keep reading.
I will not go out free. And then the master shall bring the judgment. He also brings him to the door, or to the doorpost, shall serve him.
So if you say, I love my master and I'll serve him forever, then he'll take you and he will mark you his. He'll pierce you and mark you his. Then you get to be with the master, with your wives and your children for how long? Forever. Okay. And this is where we crawl up to here to consecration and charity. Like I say, in an ideal world where I spent this hour lesson talking about what consecration is, you would see the consecration and charity as the same thing. But since men think of consecration in terms of united order and, those kinds of things, I'm going to leave them separate for now. But the thing I want you to get about charity is that when you get to a point in your desires for Christ, where you love Christ. Okay, thank you. Where you love Christ because you love Christ. And at the point where you start taking out your hooks, when you stop trying to negotiate or make bargains, where you're like, look, I'm done with the games. I love you because I love you. And I'll do whatever you ask because I love you. And when you get to that condition in your desires, where you have the pure love of Christ for Christ, and you desire him first, and you have all things through him, you're like, this is my master. And I have my wife and my children through him. I have my community and my neighbors through him. I have my extra time to sleep in through him. When you woke up, where did Little Amy go? I lost it. Anyway, Little Amy, where he's still here. He's probably about for a minute. But you desire to sleep in. When you get a chance to sleep in, after you get the chance to sleep in, do you be like, I am so grateful for Christ gave me the opportunity to sleep in? Sometimes, right? Yeah. When you, who here likes biscuits and gravy? Okay, biscuits and gravy is probably about one of the best meals ever invented. And every time I eat biscuits and gravy, especially if it's really good biscuits and gravy, where the biscuits are like really fluffy and they're round and they're cylindrical, and the gravy's like really creamy and rich. And whenever I have that kind of biscuits and gravy, I am thankful to Christ that I have the opportunity to eat those biscuits and gravy. I'm grateful that he gave me taste buds that could enjoy biscuits and gravy the way that I enjoy biscuits and gravy. Okay? You guys get what I'm saying? When I hold a little tiny baby in my arms, and that little baby puts its hands on my face, and I realized that I only have this little baby because of Christ. Okay, there's a great parable in which a man is walking through a field, and what does he find? Finds a treasure, right? So he's walking through the wheat field, and he finds a treasure. And as soon as he finds a treasure, he goes and sells everything he has to go buy the land from the owner. Now, here's the thing. What attitude did he have when he went and sold everything to have that treasure? What? He was grateful, but it was a 3-letter word. Starts with a J.
Joy.
Joy. It says with joy, he sold all that he had to go buy that field with the treasure in it. Okay? That parable was a parable that Christ was giving about Christ. When you guys find Christ, when you come to treasure Christ above everything, you go sell everything that you have in the world. You're like, I would give it up freely and with joy to have. Now, here's the funny thing. When you do that, what do you gain? You gain joy, you gain Christ, but you gain everything. Does that make sense? It goes back to being heirs and joint heirs with Christ. Through Christ, I have all things. For we are the children of God, heirs and joint heirs with Jesus Christ. So, desiring Christ, I want you guys to realize there's a ladder of motivation. And just like a ladder, your hands and feet are on different rungs, usually most of the time, right? In some areas of the gospel, your foot is still on the fear rung, right? In other areas of the gospel, your foot's on the social or maybe the duty rung, right? And then in another part of the gospel, your hand might be on the obedience rung, and then just maybe in some areas of the gospel, it's on consecration or charity, right? The goal is, though, is to scurry all the way up the ladder so that every aspect of the gospel is lived out of a desire for Christ, out of charity. Does that make sense? I didn't mean to lose you guys. You guys are sitting like, well, hello, son. Okay, so my challenge to you this week, okay, I want you guys to, and this will pertain to our Sunday school lesson next week, so this assignment's for you too, okay? I want you guys to go find 5 scriptures about Christ that inspire and encourage you. 5 scriptures about Christ that encourage you and inspire you. And next week, I'll share with you my 5, but I'm only going to share it after I hear your 5, okay? But I want you to go find 5 scriptures about Christ that inspire and encourage you, because I want you, through his word, to begin to nourish that seed of desire in your heart, like it talks about in Alma 32. I want you to start to nourish that seed. I want you guys to spend a week peeling back your faith, layer faith, and looking at the desire part of your heart and examining your motivation ladder. And I want you to use God's word to start reorienting your desires. Because you got 613 desires, and you got to retrain all of those bad boys on Jesus Christ. You got to get them off the world and onto Christ. And we're going to start out with 5. Okay? So how many of you, and I'm going to do this to you, how many of you are going to commit to find 5 scriptures that encourage and inspire you about Jesus Christ? Okay. Now, I'm not going to make you raise your hand if you aren't, but I want you, if you raise your hand, I really want you to get after it. And you can write them on tear off a piece of paper, put it in your scriptures in a bookmark, and write your 5 references on that. But I want you to go hunt for and find them. And then next week, we'll go over those together. Any questions about that? Okay, well, let's have a closing prayer, How are we on time? 11:20, perfect. All right. How many of you in there raised their hand? How many raised their hand?
I saw 3 when I was.
Okay, good.
Probably.
All of them are raising their hands.
Good. All right, you guys do your assignment, and I'll see you guys next week. Noah, will you please say our closing prayer?
Yes. Hold your arms for prayer. Hold your arms.
Please bless that whoever is sick will better in the name of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Let's go put this away.
All right, guys, I give you about 10 minutes. If you need to.
All right, guys, I'm going to leave the meeting.
Water, run home and help your mom.
See you guys next week.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.